these fights about Santa Claus. So here we have Saint Nicholas in a Dutch print from the early 19th century.
Who is Nicholas?
Yeah.
Who is Saint Nicholas? Well, for anyone that doesn't know, Saint Nicholas is famously the defender of orthodoxy against a particular kind of heresy that cropped up in the 4th century. It was the 4th century.
Yes, yes. We're now showing the Council of Nicaea, just so everybody's on the same page. Council of Nicaea, AD 325. Go.
You see what happens when we stop caring about time? It all starts falling apart. So this is a major heresy that cropped up in North Africa. The guy called Arius, who was such a threat to the church that they called a council, which is called the Council of Nicaea, to deal with it. Arius had been pulling people out of the church, which was the only church at the time, Catholic Church, Catholic Orthodox Church, and convincing Christians that Christ was not God himself in flesh.
How could he do that? How could Arius convince people of that?
It's kind of mystifying to think about it.
Well, why should he think that? I mean, there's Wikipedia entries on it. I'm sure everybody who has been arguing with me online has already looked these up.
Yeah. Well, Arius was a bit concerned about all of the parts of Scripture where it appears that Christ is telling everybody to worship his Father and not worship him.
Oh, really?
So
Arius said that.
Yes.
Arius said that the Son and the Father are different characters. How horrifying.
Ignoring Christ's own words.
To quote, who did Jesus pray to in the garden? I've heard it said that some people worry about this question.
I think a lot of people are worried about this question now.
Apparently, including Arius. Okay.
The spirit of Arius lives on.
Why? Why does the spirit of Arius live on? That's like I think we do. It's like if only my voice would stick around long enough to finish this conversation. Oh. Why does the spirit of Arius stick around?
Well, the Alexandrian Patriarchate were very concerned with this because
Wait, where's Alexandria? Alexandria. You said Alexandria.
Egypt.
I thought Rome was the one putting its foot down on all of this. Where's Alexandria?
It's so funny that everybody always wants to talk trash about Catholics being Romans and and the Catholics having just been Christianized pagan Romans. They always forget about us Africans. It's so sad.
How horrible! You poor Copts.
I know. I feel so left out. We're always left out from these arguments. I think they don't really like to kind of deal with it because we're putting a spanner in the industrial revolution mentality that, you know, is angry and aggressive against Catholicism. Nobody wants to look at Alexandria. They love hating on you Romans though. But back in the day when we were besties and we hadn't had any schisms, Alexandria was respected as a major theological center, and we sent our own people to Rome to teach them. There was no memory loss at that moment, and unfortunately, Egypt and North Africa had been a hotbed of heresy.
What is heresy? What do you think of as heresy? What is it?
It's a denial of Orthodox teaching.
So Dorothy Sayers has a very interesting definition of it. It's the questions the common man asks. That she has this lovely essay on chaos or creed or chaos. I think it's that one. It's either that or Doctrine is the Dogma, where she goes through the ancient heresies and shows that they're actually the questions that the common man on the street asks. Like, exactly how is the Son of God God? I don't get it.
Yes.
Oh, wait, so heresy.
Well, neither did Arius.
Neither did Arius.
No, but this was a huge problem because Arius came along and started asking these questions. How can Christ be God if he was referring to the Father as the one worthy of worship? How can he be God if he was talking and praying to his Father in the garden, etc.?
Right.
This was an incredibly huge scandal in Egypt, which you have to realize at the time was not Muslim. It was not Arabized. It was entirely Coptic and entirely Orthodox Catholic at that moment.
Right.
And it was one of the major centers of Christendom. I mean, Alexandria was it theologically for a very long time. It was the center of the Roman world at one time. So
it's also a great center of learning, right? The library at Alexandria.
Yes.
It's in Alexandria where they translate the scriptures into Greek. It's in Alexandria where Philo lives and allegorizes all of the Old Testament. Alexandria is a major intellectual center, and so it's appropriate that this debate rises there, not Rome.
Yes.
Rome is intellectually a complete and utter backwater. Get it into your heads. Rome was not the center of anything except for the military power.
At the time, it was Africa. Africa was the place to be.
Africa was Africa, and then Antioch, which is where Peter was. But Alexandria and Antioch are the two great intellectual centers of ancient Christianity. Rome is a backwater. Yeah. And if I can get anybody to listen to me right now tonight, remember this. Constantine so considered Rome a backwater, he moved his capital to Constantinople because he didn't think Rome mattered anymore. So much for the Pope. The Pope.
How much shade
how about
on
this?
One city?
Is the Pope even at the Council of Nicaea? The Pope's not there.
Nope.
So now you can do a Bart Ehrman on us and make it a Roman imperial thing, but you have to recognize it's Roman imperial from the East, from the Greek-speaking world, and this is a debate that's going on between people in Alexandria. Okay.
Yes.
Keep going.
So yeah, I mean, this was a huge scandal that had emerged in the Coptic world, and it was the Copts who were concerned about this intellectual contagion spreading throughout the rest of Christendom,
right? Because
what Arius had done in asking his petty questions without referring to the clergy to assist him in
they're good
understanding.
Questions. No, they're good questions.
Good questions. Yes, but
they're just not new to the present. That's the problem. Everybody thinks they invent them every time, and Arius did it before them.
Good questions can lead to disastrous consequences if you undermine the traditional foundations of the faith that you've rested on, even to be able to ask those questions in the first place. So he rejected the patriarchy of the church and began to spread this heretical concept that Christ was not God in flesh, and that he was only created man, created Son of God, instead of being God himself incarnate. The Africans were extremely worried that this was going to spread into the rest of Christendom, because it had started to pull out so many people from the Orthodox Catholic Church in Egypt. And what happened when people started to deny that Christ is God in flesh, then we start to deny the temple tradition, which points to that burning tree that the Lord himself emerges out of. And for Copts, that icon is very, very, very important. It's referenced everywhere and it's produced everywhere. And the Coptic people have been particularly concerned with the way that Christians have described the Incarnation. This is one of the reasons why we're currently in schism with the Byzantine Christians, and why Alexandria and Antioch fell out of favor with each other, because we had such a strong sense of wanting to preserve the Orthodox Catholic faith from these kinds of heretical sects that were denying the incarnation of Christ. So Arius is running around making trouble, and it's fracturing the church from within. We have suddenly a chaotic disunity, and then they call the Council of Nicaea. So no Roman Pope is present. It's the bishops from the patriarchates which are coming together to meet in Nicaea and to discuss the heresy that Arius has introduced to the church, this concept that Christ is not God himself in flesh. So we get to the point where a very special bishop arrives, the man known as Saint Nicholas, who has very strong feelings about what Arius is doing. Saint Nick is very pious, Saint Nicholas, but loses his temper, and during the debate with Arius, smacks him across the face.
See how appropriate it is? I'm losing my temper. I want to be Saint Nicholas. I want to just smack these Arians. So picture
he did many other things, and he's remembered for hitting a man across
He's remembered for hitting a man. So who became Arian? Right. This is the reason I actually looked up the Arianism, which we need to go back to because we need to talk through the theological problem here.
Well, in the East and the West, so we have this weird mirror. So the spirit of Arius lives on. It's very hard. Once people start asking questions and then rejecting the incarnation of Christ, it becomes very difficult to put the genie back in that bottle. So the Arian heresy spread, his sect spread throughout North Africa. It goes in two directions. It goes east and then it goes up into Europe. So you end up with two different populations of people that adopt Arianism, even though they may not recognize it as officially Arianism. But that seed takes root in two different places. One was in Arabia, which had previously been Orthodox Catholic.
And what do they become?
What did
those Arabian Aryans become?
They became Muslims. Ooh. They became Mohammedans. Yes.
Really? So they deny the incarnation. They deny the incarnation of the Son.
So no incarnation, and suddenly we have the Mohammedan sect declaring that God cannot have a mother, God cannot be born. He is completely distinct from his own creation. So they deny the entrance of God into time to become one with his own creatures. Of course, which means that the Mohammedans were completely denying the entire temple tradition of the Israelites in doing so. And so we get to a problem of the Muslim understanding of the ancient Hebrews religion, which is
the Arabian tradition is part of this fracturing in antiquity.
Yes. And so Orthodox Catholic Arabians were obviously in great danger when this was going on because they were professing the incarnate God and they were worshipping an incarnate God. They were Coptic, so that there's this huge problem that springs up in the East. On the other hand, in the Roman world, up into Europe, we have Arius's teachings going in and finding another population of tribal people.
Do you remember the name of the person that translates the scriptures into Gothic for them? Ulfilas. It's very hard to scan, don't you think? Ulfilas.
Yeah, it's really difficult. Imagine writing an entire poem with the main character as Ulfilas.
Who would do that? Who would try writing an entire poem about Ulfilas? By Aurora Borealis, you'll know what we're talking about. Okay, so Ulfilas translates the scriptures into Gothic, but he has this alien understanding of who the Son is. Now the Wikipedia entry is actually quite helpful, and it's Arianism taught that the Logos was a divine being begotten by God the Father before the creation of the world, made him a medium through whom everything else was created, and that the Son of God is subordinate to God the Father. Right? So that is the prime question that Arius asked, is like, indeed, the one that we've heard being asked regularly on the internet. How did the Son pray to the Father in the garden? And this was Arius's answer. Yes. A verse from Proverbs was also used. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, which is Proverbs 8:22. Therefore, the Son was rather the very first and the most perfect of God's creatures, and he was made God only by the Father's permission and power. So he's divine, but only like indirectly, right? He's not himself of the same substance with the Father.
No co-equality attributed to the Son of God, and he's not considered co-eternal in the sense that he's created and not begotten. Which seems like hair splitting, but this distinction was the very reason why the Council of Nicaea was called in the first place, because the Christian world had not yet decided on a formula to express their Christology or their understanding of Christ until Arius came along.
Right, so it's actually a good thing. It's a good thing that people come along and ask questions. This is good.
Definitely.
This is good. Maybe I shouldn't be so mad. Except for there are questions that are so old that they're in the creed, but you know.
The creed is the declaration that we say in every liturgy